Sometimes a game is all style, no substance, but Hideki Kamiya once watched a few episodes of Kamen Rider and thought to himself, why not both? The result being the Viewtiful Joe games for GameCube and PlayStation 2, a series of stylish beat-em-ups that love to make pop culture references like there is no tomorrow. Both the first and second game are fairly close together, both in story and in gameplay, so I figured I'd make this a double feature. Viewtiful Joe starts off with our hero Joe and his girlfriend Sylvia at the movies when the movie itself suddenly becomes self-aware and the on-screen villain reaches out and kidnaps Sylvia. So, like the hero he deems himself to be, Joe leaps right after them to try to save her. In the movie, appropriately named Movie Land, we get introduced to Blue, a retired Power Ranger who gives Joe the power of Tokusatsu with a little device called a V-Watch. Now, not quite Viewtiful Joe has the power of movie magic called VFX, and over the course of the game learns various abilities that are reminiscent of movie editing. You can get the ability to slow things down, strengthening your punches and kicks, dodge attacks, as well as slowing down propellers on platforms and decrease the flow of water. Alongside, we also get to fast forward with the speed up ability that makes Joe go so fast that he eventually gets set on fire. This is very useful for quickly dispatching enemies along the way, as well as making Joe immune to any and all fire as long as he himself is on fire. Lastly, we get the ability to zoom in and out, which depending on the combination of moves gives varying results. The slow zoom punch, for instance, is the most powerful attack in the game, and you rely extremely heavily on this to get through bosses. However, you also get special kicks, punches, and a neat ability called Ukemi, which allows you to mitigate the damage you got from a hit by zooming in right before you hit the ground. Using these tools, Joe now has the power to beat his way through Movie Land, fighting various enemies as well as some hilarious bosses. From a bat with a snort to a not-so-smart shark to literally being Gurren Lagann before Gurren Lagann was Gurren Lagann. We learned that the League of Villains that we're fighting are trying to use Sylvia to break out of Movie Land and take over the world. So, we fight our way through the Evil Five's League of Villain bosses all the way to the finale to save our girlfriend and be the hero we always wanted to be. But no movie is complete without a twist, and being as self-aware as Viewtiful Joe is, we find out that the boss of the evil gang is actually Blue, the very guy who gave you the V-Watch to begin with. But that's not all. Blue is also Sylvia's father, a movie maker whose movies were so praised that he very much became part of the very same movies that he made. To save the Earth, we fight on top of the Earth in our giant Megazord. Believe me, I cheered loudly for this. I wanted the Megazord since the Rogue Galaxy playthrough and was robbed one too many times. And after this epic battle for the fate of Earth, we have to fight Blue on foot. Luckily, the game does one of my favorite things during this sequence by making the finale an amalgamation of various things you've learned throughout the game, giving you a strategy to deal with this fight beforehand. After defeating Blue, the Earth is saved and the credits roll, but wait, there is one final twist. Now the Earth is threatened by an alien invasion, and Joe, now Viewtiful Joe, has to stop it with the help of Sylvia, who now also has a V-Watch and turned into the cheerleader ranger's sexy Sylvia. With that, the credits roll and we get the most early 2000s version of what I can only describe as Sum 41, but Japanese, leaving this game on a very high comedic note. The second game continues right where the first game left off, with Joe and Sylvia now fighting the aliens from the first game with an evil space emperor at the helm. Following much of the same formula, minus the whole becoming a superhero thing, we have to once more save Movie Land, but this time from the space invaders. The evil emperor wants to get his hands on all the Oscars to gain superior movie powers, and we have to fight our way through hit movies such as Ghetto Park, The Statue of Doom, and Do Androids Dream of Romantic Scene. It follows the first game nearly step by step in terms of gameplay, however with the addition of Sylvia we also get a new tool of our arsenal. The rewind attack lets you hit an attack 3 times, and a lot of the game's puzzles are built around this, giving you some challenging obstacles along the way to figure out. Viewtiful Joe 2 also makes it feel like they figured out the style they wanted to go for. Backgrounds feel more lush and are filled with more detail than the first one. Enemies are more themed after the movies, and we also get some ridiculously good music to go along with it. The gameplay in the first game felt tight and responsive, but somehow the second game makes it feel even more satisfying. The first game is like a hot knife through butter, but the second one it has a very sharp and hot knife. Probably the best way you can put it into comparison. Bosses also have more mechanics to them, though not always as good. Cameo Leon, I only just got the joke when I started writing this, has a few neat tricks where he turns invisible, and you have to use various powers to find him in a fight, but at the same time, he also gets healed a lot. The first game does this with Bruce, the dim-witted shark boss, and I really didn't enjoy that all too much. It makes you feel like you're getting punished for not getting the entirety of the fight. In the end, though, it does make bosses a lot of fun to figure out, and I quite enjoy most of the boss fights in both games, just not the final boss of 2. You see, the first game did a wonderful thing. It sets up mechanics throughout the game to teach you how to use them, and then made the final boss a compilation of sorts of set mechanics. Learning to dodge certain moves, learning how slow and speed affect the way you fight really came together at the end. The second game has none of that. The final boss follows the same formula, though now with an even bigger Megazord, which is something I encourage every game to do from this point onward. With you fighting on top of Earth for the faith of Earth once more. But this time you're fighting a literal Death Star. I'm not joking, it is actually a Death Star. Defeating this robot reveals that your dad, who has been changing the film reels, was actually the villain, and he wanted to get all the Oscars to become so powerful that his movies could take over the world. And thus we crash the actual Oscars in a battle for the Oscars in a final confrontation against the exact opposite of what the first boss does. This boss has moves that feel impossible to dodge, and you start to fight without any powers, so once you get your powers, you're actually down quite a bit of health. He has a projectile attack that he fires after you, a slice attack which you have to jump out of, and he does a judgment cut that would make Virgil jealous from how much damage it does. It is not a fun fight to figure out, and I mostly had to rely on the zoom uppercut to beat this boss and save the day. Both Viewtiful Joe games offer a lot of things. They're incredibly solid beat-em-ups with a very unique and memorable style. Controls are smooth and responsive, and combat feels incredibly satisfying in both games. I appreciate the inclusion of puzzles to break up the flow of beat up dude and then beat up said other dude. And the story is goofy and hilariously over the top, and the pop culture references really work in favor of the style the game was going for. A great homage to the tokusatsu genre as a whole, and probably one of the most stylish beat-em-ups on the PS2. I will have to say, if you play this on the GameCube version, the color pops a lot more versus the more subdued tones of the PS2 version. However, the PS2 version of Viewtiful Joe 1 has you play as Dante if you beat the game once, and it is freaking hilarious. If I were to give a rating to both games as a whole, I'd say Viewtiful Joe 1 and 2 get an 8.5 out of 10.